So remember they're changing my voice. I'd like to point out that I'm American, and America oppresses me every day. They deny me my freedom of speech. They cause me cognitive damage by using chemicals to make so my brain is more sensitive. Um, Ultimately, the effect, right? The ears, the brain is more sensitive to noises at times. Um, they bright me every day and make it so my eyes are more sensitive to bright lights. They use advanced technology to get at me. And many, probably thousands of other people have reported similar incidences. In this nation, there's like a million cases of group stalking every year, and there's about 4 million cases of stalking every year, if I remember correctly from the Justice Department statistics. Okay, they don't seem to care about the fact that it's basically a modern slave state with a thin veil, a facade of freedom. Okay, the internet is full of censorship and political bias. All the sites are owned by people who play favorites. They practice favoritism and political bias. And a lot of people, former presidents, and so on and so forth, have accused the internet of this publicly and otherwise. So it's pretty straightforward that America is a very much a fanatic propaganda state that refuses to treat me fairly. I'm shunned by attractive women here, even though it's a capitalist nation. I'm a college graduate, the son of 2 doctors, one a brain surgeon, okay, who researches cures for various things, forms of cancer, I'm told, malaria, what have you, They suppressed these cures for racial reasons, for petty reasons, you know. There's basically a bunch of people who are concerned with sexual control and monetary control, financial control, who control the religious institutions. So they're not religious fanatics in the sense that they believe in God in a certain way and that they're persecuting other people. They're more like organized crime and sexual sadists or sexually sadistic. Okay. I have 22 witnesses to the sabotage campaign against me, but every once in a while people still in the comments pretend that I'm crazy. Pretend that, if you imagine you're there and you have 22 people witness, a bunch of racist people harassing you, and somebody says, oh, you know what, that doesn't matter. You're crazy if you think that's going on. What about these 22 witnesses from different races and genders, from different walks of life? It's very, very petty what they're doing. Of course, by now they've gotten to at least some of the witnesses, if not all of them. But I have their testimony on record still at this point. Okay. There's no excuse for the degree of just gaslighting, hypocrisy, pettiness. When I was younger, I went to private schools and so on and so forth, but the public schools, I'd imagine, weren't that much different. But I'm guessing maybe they were a lot more different than I thought, because I never went to public school in grade school. I did in high school. Basically, they impressed upon us that, America can never violate your constitutional rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, so on and so forth, and that you can call them on it. They explained things in a way that suggested that if America starts being very racist and unfair, that people are idiots if they don't rally to address that in truth with no ulterior motives. For instance, you can't say, hey, if you're going to, we'll help you out if you endorse the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, or you argue the Jews are chosen or whatever. Okay, this is outrageous as hell. With no strings attached, is to say, hey, you know what, an injustice for one is an injustice for all. But we don't see that going on. We see people playing stupid, including Democrats, not just Republicans and libertarians, but also Democrats. They have agendas, feminist, gay, white, LGBT, corporate, you name it, tons and tons of agendas, lobby groups that are only concerned with those agendas, social clubs concerned with sexual control and who seems to have a higher social status than who. I mean, it's very, very petty. It's pettier than a black chick in the ghetto beating up another black chick over wearing the same dress to the prom or the Christmas dance or something. I mean, it is the essence of petty. Those types of people basically got it from the rich to be petty and immature. It's trickled down sort of Greco-Roman culture. Okay, so like right now, I have ringing in my ears, and for whatever reason, when I lower the window, it tends to help. I'm gonna lower it a little more. And then there's fumes coming in from outside. So they fume me in the inside of the car, they fume me in my room, they fume me in my my old room so much I had to move to my brother's old room, you know, and I still get fumed at night there. Okay, um, the gay harassment and the situation has created threats where, on top of security measures on my property, you know, dogs and so on and so forth. Um, I also had to, um, block the windows and so on and so forth. So at night, I can't air it out, but the fumes also come in from outside. Okay. Remember, I have 22 witnesses to these things, including several witnesses to fuming, and at least one witness to the covert drugging. And I have videos where, you know, the drink, when I take a drink of a drink, and this never happened before in my life, the soda and the straw would stay toward this top of the straw, okay, and there'd be a gap, right? There'd be a gap between that and the bottom. And this has nothing to do with saliva or anything like that. This is something that it does it itself, right? And they've drawn things on my wall in the past, right? This is, remotely activated. I wouldn't be detailing some of this stuff if it wasn't for the countless witnesses to being gang stalked. It wasn't for the obvious disinformation campaign in regards to gang stalking, right? The typical CIA disinformation campaign where they plant people there who pretend they're crazy, and then they say, oh, they just took medicine and the problems went away. You see what I'm saying? If it wasn't for all the footage of the brighting, all the footage of the round-the-clock harassment. I have like one playlist or something that has like 50, 60 days or whatever it was of brighting back to back every morning, every day. You see me getting brighted, headlights. If it wasn't for, the Neuroweapons, the people know that the military is researching neuroweapons and so on and so forth. If it wasn't for the abundance of evidence that shows that this thing has taken place, okay, it's just a matter of who, what, when, where, how, why from there. So mental health cannot look at this thing and say, oh, I'm crazy for making this argument, any more than they can say that I'm crazy for saying water is wet, because there's so much evidence. Okay, now they have the option to play stupid and gaslight, and that's what they'll probably do, but there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that is stupid to assume that I'm wrong. There's also the Havana syndrome. They didn't lock all the people up who claimed to have Havana syndrome. They did research, and one of their studies found that there was something going on. Okay, and then I believe it was the CIA themselves, right? Because they do the same thing that the foreign countries are doing, that they were accusing Cuba of it. They basically said that they concluded that there was nothing to it or something. I forgot how that ended. And of course, lots of groups, came out and said that they're not satisfied with their explanation of events and so on and so forth. So there's an existing sort of controversy over these kinds of activities, these sort of clandestine activities. In my case, the witnesses makes it clear. You can't say to somebody with 22 witnesses of people stalking him as groups and sabotaging him and fuming him that he's crazy. You just cannot. Is your argument that those 22 witnesses, suffer some kind of group psychosis? Some of them came across me one time. I met them one time and they were witness to what happened. I mean, so there's that. Yeah. You know, uh, you know, the resentment for cultures and the nation. It's more than fair for me to to start resenting people, and to start expressing that, because they're also doing it as cultures and groups and so on and so forth. So when we look at this thing and say, okay, you know, most people say that people aren't perfect. Okay, so where are they wrong? If people and their cultures have inherent flaws that allowed them to be oppressors, like Nazi Germany, communist Russia, really in modern day America, then they should think about those things and say, what about our cultures? What about our physiology? What about our brain function? What about how we think, has allowed us to, them, obviously I'm not helping them do it, has allowed them to be complicit with these atrocious activities, especially aimed at me, logically the most righteous person in human history, using a universal scale. Okay, so I'm not trying to argue with people who are fans of Gandhi or Martin Luther King or whoever they're fans of, George Washington or whoever it might be. Okay, But using a universal scale, I've achieved a higher degree of focus, moral intensity. When you have a basic understanding of brain function and better basic understanding of what righteousness is, you've defined it correctly, of what morality is. Okay, universally speaking. Okay, not with some kind of religious fanatic scale or some fanatic philosophical scale or cultural scale, but just good old good true universal morals. Okay, and it goes back to the martial art argument. Okay, if you can outmaneuver anyone in martial arts, I mean, really, if you have trouble understanding why I'm right about this, see the more serious old kung fu movies and ask yourself, what does it take for someone to beat someone else at sparring? And notice how they're philosophers, they do calligraphy, they do things to improve their brain function. So you have to have certain mental precision to achieve moral precision, and it doesn't necessarily show itself in articulation, because that's a different brain function. For example, you know how will I knit or draw or paint says little to nothing about my moral intensity, my moral worth. But how I'm able to cultivate character and outmaneuver people at sparring and be more intense and precise, okay, that says a lot. Okay, when you see that moral